And thanks for staying up late with us as we dive into all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. The new week is off to a fast start as usual. Tariff deals and relief, tax breaks for the rich, and could Air Force One be replaced with a palace in the sky? The Trump administration could be ready to accept this gift, and we're diving into it all. So toss that phone aside and hang with us. This jet could be a possible gift from Qatar. It'd be a temporary Air Force One before being donated to the foundation overseeing President Trump's presidential library. We're diving into this clause and getting a reaction from a political science professor and our panel about a clause in the Constitution that basically says, hey, should you be able to accept these types of gifts from foreign countries? We'll look at that. And we're talking 2028. Yes, we know it's 3 years from now. But guess what? Democrats have a big decision to make, and it's not just who they'll put on the ticket. We're diving into all of this coming up in just a few minutes here. But we begin tonight with an executive order targeting prescription drugs. President Trump set a 30-day deadline to lower the cost of prescription drugs themselves, or they'll face limits down the road when it comes to what the government will pay. President Trump says the goal is for Americans to pay what other countries pay. Take a listen.
Basically, what we're doing is equalizing. There's a new word that I came up with, which I think is probably the best word. We're going to equalize. We're all going to pay the same. We're going to pay what Europe's going to pay. We're going to all pay. Now, there may be some countries in dire need, and I would be willing to sacrifice that and help them. But it's called Most Favored Nation. We are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world.
But what's not clear is how it'll impact Americans who have private health insurance, if at all. Now, where the government has the most power is drugs covered by Medicare and Medicaid. The drug lobby has said any threats to profits could impact the research they do on new drugs. You know, this next one is something that so many people are talking about on social media. Here's what some of you had to say on our Fox 2 Facebook page. This show is all about you, and we appreciate your messages. Kevin writing into The Pulse, great job. He keeps on winning. He had 15 replies, maybe some who agreed, some who disagreed, and 52 likes. On the surface, Michael says, this is very positive. I've just grown very skeptical of his reasoning. This seems like a no-brainer that he could have led off with and built up some credibility instead of 100 days of chaos. Bobby says hopefully auto insurance is next. And Michelle says after everything else that's increasing, that's the least he could do. But this comes as House Republicans introduced legislation that would cut at least $108 billion, largely to Medicaid. The reason is to help cover the cost of the $4.5 trillion in tax breaks. Republicans claim they're just rooting out what they call waste, fraud, and abuse. But Democrats warn millions of people will lose coverage. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the proposals would reduce the number of people with health care by 8.6 million over the next decade. You know, the crowded Democratic field for Senate adds yet another name. This man, State Representative Joe Tate, throwing his hat into the ring. He's running to replace Senator Gary Peters, who, as we've told you, decided not to run next year. Tate made history when he became the first black House Speaker in 2022, but he only held on to the gavel for 2 years because Republicans won the House back last year. In his campaign video, Tate said he's running to lay the foundation for Michigan's next generation.
But Washington has broken faith with us. Instead of creating opportunity for all, Donald Trump and the Republicans are cutting taxes for the wealthy, and they're betraying our senior citizens, our children, and my fellow veterans to do it. On the battlefield and on the football field, I never back down from a fight. My Michigan story begins with the foundation.
As we said, Tate joins a crowded Democratic field. Former Wayne County Health Director Dr. Abdullah El-Sayed. Yes, we're talking about State Senator Mallory McMurrow next to him. And Congresswoman Haley Stevens all announced they'll run for the Senate seat. Now, by the way, we spoke to El-Sayed, McMurrow, and Stevens about their bids. You can watch those interviews by scanning the QR code on your screen. I'll take you to every episode of The Pulse we've done right there. Now, we're reaching out to Tate's campaign to set up a time with him. We're also in touch with the campaign for former Congressman Mike Rogers. He's in a field of one right now, the only Republican candidate who's declared his bid. He ran in last year's Senate seat, losing to now Senator Alyssa Slotkin by a very small margin. We're hoping to get him on as well, as we're doing for all candidates in the major races that you will vote on. Well, major news in the trade war between the U.S. and China today. Both sides agreeing to a 90-day truce, restarting trade negotiations and slashing the tariffs both sides slapped on one another. The U.S. dropped its tariffs on Chinese goods to 30%. Now, while that sounds high, consider the fact it was actually at 145%. And China dropped its tariffs on U.S. goods to 10%, down significantly from the 125 it was at. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the goal is the same, while some analysts say it's too early to call it a win.
Want more balanced trade, and I think that both sides are committed to achieving that. We would like to see China open to more U.S. goods.
If you look at what Trump is doing, he's blinking, he's stepping things down and claiming victories.
Now, we've been keeping a really close eye on stocks since the trade war started, and it was a good day for investors today. All three major indices finished in the green, as you see right over here. The Dow at 42,000, NASDAQ up 779, the S&P up 184. By the way, I did lose my button while I was talking to you when I was pointing at the screen. It happens. It's television. That was a story that had a lot of people talking over the weekend. The ruling family of Qatar possibly gifting a luxury jumbo jet to the United States, specifically the president. And President Trump defending the idea tonight. Reports say the president would use it as his presidential plane until shortly before leaving office. That's when it'll finally be ready. Then ownership will be transferred to the foundation overseeing his presidential library. Both of the planes used as Air Force One are more than 30 years old right now. Boeing is contracted to build updated ones, but that project has been delayed. The president defended this idea today, adding he wouldn't use it after leaving office.
I think that was a very nice gesture. Now, I could be a stupid person to say, oh, no, we don't want a free plane. We give free things out. We'll take one, too. And it helps us out because, again, we're talking about we have 40-year-old aircraft. The money we spend, the maintenance we spend on those planes to keep them tippy-top is astronomical. You wouldn't even believe it.
You know, while the president plans to convert the plane into something he can fly on as president, there are some changes that have to be made, like adding secure communications and other classified elements. It'll still be more limited than the current Air Force One fleet. You see, the current planes have radiation shielding and anti-missile technology. They also have sophisticated communication systems to let the president stay in touch with the military so he can issue orders from anywhere in the world. And then there's the constitutional concern. You see, this could violate what's known as the emoluments clause, which says this: no title of nobility shall be granted by the United States, and no person holding any office of profit or trust under them shall, without the consent of Congress, accept or present emolument, office, or title of any kind whatsoever from any king, prince, or foreign state. We spoke with Oakland University Political Science Chair Peter Trumbore, who says it's primarily to prevent bribery and foreign influence on government officials. He talked about what happens with foreign gifts normally and where this could become an issue.
Here's where it could be a problem. If Trump thinks he gets to keep it after he leaves office. So you're allowed to accept gifts from foreign countries on behalf of the United States. It happens all the time. And typically those gifts go into various collections held by the U.S. government, whether it's at the archives or at any of the Smithsonian facilities or whatever. They don't become the personal property of whoever has been given that gift without the consent of Congress. So the idea that the Qataris are offering this luxury jet to President Trump to be the new Air Force One, that's troubling for reasons that have to do, in my mind, of national security and all kinds of things like that. But the bigger and more troubling question is, does Trump think he gets to keep it? And if the answer to that is yes, or if he wants to keep it, he has to get Congress's approval. That's one of the requirements of the emoluments clause, is you can't keep any gift as personal property without the consent of Congress.
Now, we should mention the Qatari government says no final decisions have been made. The move is being looked at by both nations' legal departments. That's just one of the things our panel is talking about tonight, along with the president's push to lower prescription drug prices amid talk that Medicaid could see cuts. Former State House Speaker Tom Leonard and Lori Goldman with Fems for Dems in Studio C. I think this button situation will not be fixed by the end of the show. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. So glad you're with us here tonight. Joining us to dive into several different issues, Femmes for Dems founder Lori Goldman and former Republican State House Speaker Tom Leonard. Always good to see you both. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Pulse.
Glad to be back.
All right, let's talk about this plane from Qatar. So many people are concerned, Tom, we'll begin with you about this. And you just kind of put the shoe on the other foot for a moment. And if, for whatever reason, Joe Biden was still president, and we found out that he was talking to Qatar about receiving a gift of that would become Air Force One, I would imagine that a lot of the Republicans, especially the MAGA right, would be having a field day saying, how could this guy do this? When Trump does it, it's getting a different reaction from a lot of Republicans. What do you think's going on here?
Well, first, let me say the prosecutor and me, let's wait a few days. I know this deal is supposed to be out in the next few days. We'll know more details and we'll see what exactly is in it. But I think the ultimate question becomes, is President Trump, if this plane is received, is he actually going to be able to keep it personally when he leaves the presidency, or is it going to stay here in the United States to be used by future presidents? If it's the latter, I would say probably a pretty good deal if the United States of America is getting a multi-$100 million plane for free and it's being used for future presidents.
But when you see, like Made in America is such an important piece of America first, making things here at home and making sure that's what all this tariff deal is about, manufacturing stuff here at home. Yet Senator Chuck Schumer, I guess, said nothing says America first like Air Force One being brought to you by Qatar. Does he have a point there, you think, somewhat?
Well, I would say, Rupert, we're not using he's not talking about using taxpayer dollars to manufacture a new plane. This is a plane that has already been manufactured, and again, the country Qatar wants to give it to the United States. Again, ultimately the question becomes, is the president able to take it with him when he leaves office?
Lori, your concerns about this, including, I think, according to the White House, they've reviewed the emoluments clause, and they say this does not violate that. There are people who accept gifts, and Democrats have accepted gifts, Republicans have accepted gifts. What stands out for you here?
Well, I'm just waiting. I want to see what North Korea offers up. That's going to be interesting. But I think it's a problem because Trump is elected as our president for all the people. He's not our king. I think it's a bad look. And I guarantee you, and I'm a betting person, that he is going to want to keep that after his term is over. And if he does, the American taxpayer, from what I read today, is going to have to foot the bill to outfit that for the security concerns when he becomes a private citizen again.
The Emoluments Act basically says, look, we want to prevent any federal office holders or stakeholders in this country from getting gifts from foreign states without the consent of Congress. Why don't you think that this fits maybe in the Emoluments Act clause?
Again, and let's be clear here, this plane is not going to the president directly. My understanding is that it's being gifted to the Department of Defense. So it's the Department of Defense is who will own or control, or ultimately the United States of America will control, this plane. Congress will have to vote. My understanding is that Congress will have to vote, again, if the president were to take it with him upon leaving office. That would be a very large hurdle, Roop. So again, the former prosecutor in me wants to see all the details. I don't want to assume anything. And within the next week, we should know whether or not this plane's going to be accepted and what the details look like.
And honestly, the news that comes out of this administration is so quick that things do change by the day. Next week, we'll see what happens with this, whether or not it is something that will get the test of all of these things we're talking about. So we'll watch it really carefully.
And as I say, and never forget, I mean, this is a president that keeps everybody, especially Democrats, on their heels every day. I mean, it was just a couple of weeks ago that he announced that Mike Waltz was leaving as a national security advisor, and for hours, all day long, the Democrats were going after him for being the first member of the administration to fall. And then a few hours later, he announced that he was going to be the UN ambassador. So there is no telling what the president's going to do from day to day.
We'll watch this carefully. I want to talk about China now. This was a pretty significant meeting, regardless of what side of the political alley you're on. A meeting in Switzerland takes place. The Treasury Secretary essentially forges a deal that brings down the tariffs significantly. And for China, it means from 145%, they go down to 30%. For America, it means 125% down to 10%. This is, according to many who don't find themselves on either end of the political spectrum, a winning day because of what it does for all of us. Would you agree with that, Lori?
I don't know. Beijing is calling this a win for them. You know, back in 2020, President Trump then made a deal with China that they were going to spend billions more in buying American goods. It never happened. So I don't know what's really going to happen. He was so steadfast about wanting this and gave us all the reasons why. And the minute somebody puts up a barrier, he changes his mind.
But if we're really looking at history, as I know you do, and Tom, you do as well, correctly, we know that it wasn't just but a year and a half ago that the Biden spokesperson came out and said, look, these Trump-era tariffs that Biden extended were increased by Biden. I think Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at the time says, look, this is to target harmful policies and practices that impact American workers and businesses, and he ended up increasing the tariffs, Biden did, on $15 billion worth of goods. So it's almost as though Biden agreed that I'll keep your tariffs in place, and heck, I'm going to increase them. Do you think that this is a good policy? Does it make sense?
I don't think it's a good policy. I'm from a steel town, used to be a steel town e-course, and tariffs hurt everybody starting at the lowest level of buying groceries, paying for everything from insurance to automobiles. So no, I don't think it is. And you know what? Whatever Biden did, Biden who? He's gone. Now we're dealing with this. No,
sure. But I'm just saying that there are some things that were done by other presidents who had different political stripes. Yeah. And that when this guy does it, we often talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about prescription drugs and Medicaid here for a moment. I want to talk to you about your concerns. Tom, you are, I know you're a very caring person. You care about, when you were working as a legislator, cared deeply about the people who you represented. That hasn't changed. Are you worried about what's going on with Medicaid right now? Because there's talk about having to make some cuts.
Well, I mean, let me be clear here. What are House Republicans talking about when it comes to cuts? Able-bodied adults that do not have independence. So think of the young man who simply is not getting a job right now and is able to work. They're saying if you're going to get Medicaid, you're going to get a job or you're going to perform community service. They're telling states that give Medicaid to illegal immigrants, if you're going to continue to give money to illegal immigrants, we are not going to take taxpayer dollars from the hardworking taxpayers here in Michigan and give it to California and give it to New York so you can pass it out to people that are here illegally. Those are the cuts that we are talking about. And once again, the Democrats are on the 20% of an 80% issue.
Lori, do you think that this is being misrepresented? Because as Tom pointed out, these cuts are not to everybody unilaterally. It is instead to states that are giving out this, or I guess the Trump administration should say, doling out money to people who aren't working and those who are helping support people who are here illegally.
Well, historically, that's how it always starts, right? It makes sense. It sounds like a good idea, but I guarantee you in the end, we're all going to pay for that as well. The people that need it most, the people that are not sitting back on their couches watching TV all day and not working, they're going to be hurt by this. So I don't think that it's a fair and equitable look at how to take care of this problem.
Prescription drug costs. I know Alyssa Slotkin, Senator Slotkin now, was so passionate about this, having her own mother who dealt with just exorbitant, so many of us have dealt with exorbitant prices. This executive order the president signed today essentially says, hey, we got to cut the cost. You happy about that? Is that good?
Of course, if it happens. Talk to me when it happens. I think it's a great thing. If he does that, I'll say yay to you if he does.
That's a good thing.
No, and that's good to hear. And listen, I think we all know Donald Trump is one of, if not the greatest negotiator in this country. We just mentioned what he did with tariffs. He made China blink when nobody thought he could do it. I believe he's doing the same thing with the pharmaceutical companies right now. And if you really look at this executive order, Roop, what is he saying? Donald Trump is saying, listen, if you sell a drug to another nation at a much lower price than you are here in the United States, we just simply want you to match that price for our citizens here.
I want to say thank you to you, both of you, for joining us. We have so much to talk about every single day, so we hope you'll come back and join us sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I get so excited that I actually bust buttons on the show. You saw that.
I love it.
It literally went like this. The button busted open. It is so good to see you both. Tom Leonard, Lori Goldman, thank you for your time here on The Pulse tonight. We're getting you caught up with some of the other big stories you missed over the weekend, including the Trump administration's newest idea to speed up deportations. How he wants to do it. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. It is People, Power, and Politics. Welcome back to Detroit's only nightly political talk show, The Pulse. We always tell you to throw your phone aside when the show comes on, but maybe you threw your phone aside for the entire weekend. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, let's face it, it was beautiful outside, Mother's Day weekend, right? So that's why we're getting you up to date on some of the big stories that happened over the weekend while you were away. So in case you missed it, the Trump administration is looking to speed up deportations by suspending a key constitutional right. We're talking about habeas corpus. And stay with me here because we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but it won't all be in Latin. According to Cornell Law School, this allows a prisoner or other detainee, so think someone institutionalized for mental illness, to challenge their imprisonment in court. It can only be suspended in cases of rebellion or invasion if public safety requires it. And here's what's really important. Congress is who has the power to suspend it, not the executive branch, aka the president. Still, Homeland Security Advisor and White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, says it's something they're looking into.
The Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So I would say that's an option we're actively looking at.
But a Wayne State law professor says not so fast, pointing to the Supreme Court ruling multiple times that everyone has due process in the United States. And it's something we've talked about several times on The Pulse. The 14th Amendment. Article 1 of this amendment says no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The professor is saying the key here is the fact that it says person, not citizen.
The end run that the administration is suggesting around this is that, well, that's not true if habeas corpus is suspended. If habeas corpus is suspended, all bets are off, and people never get the opportunity to go to court to claim their due process rights. But because if habeas corpus is suspended, all bets are off, that's exactly why the Constitution makes it so hard to suspend habeas corpus. That's why the Constitution says the president can't just do it on his own. That's why the Constitution says nobody can do it unless the public safety requires it, because we're in a state of actual rebellion or invasion. And that means real invasion, not, metaphorical invasion or something that sort of, you might imagine is sort of like an invasion if you look at it sideways. That means an actual invasion.
Last time habeas corpus was suspended was back in 1941. It was suspended in Hawaii after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And finally, tonight, we're looking ahead to 2028. Yes, we know there is a midterm before then, but Democrats have a couple of big decisions to make. One of them, which state goes first in the primaries? President Biden forced a change in the 2024 election calendar, moving South Carolina's primary ahead of Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. Those four states are now trying to get top billing, and other states could make a play for that, too. Each state offers different advantages to different candidates. New Hampshire held an unsanctioned primary in January of last year as a rebellion of sorts. President Biden didn't put his name on the ballot, but won as a write-in. And with that, now you're all caught up. And with that, that buttons up the Pulse for tonight. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. We'll see you back here tomorrow.